everyone. Welcome back to the 40% Better podcast, where we talk about leadership, typically in the realm of the world of technology, because that's what I've been playing in for 20 plus years now. And today, Jonathan has graciously accepted our invite to come and share his wisdom with us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bill. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. So this is totally not a scripted kind of a thing. The one question that I ask everybody, the one scripted question, is how did you get started in leadership?
Well, it's an interesting one. So, I was a software engineer years ago, and really, like, I was doing well in that role. I enjoyed teaching others and doing presentations, like say at lunchtime, like learn a new technology, and try to get other people to understand it and maybe adopt it. And so it felt like a natural fit. I would say in those early days, though, I became a manager of a few software engineers, and I was not the best leader at the time. And I actually moved away from leadership in my next role, and then moved back into it. And I was much better that second time around, I think, right? Because I think I understood it a bunch more. But yeah, it was around things I noticed I enjoyed doing, and so I asserted myself, and it worked. I was able to get promoted.
Nice. That leading and then individual contributor and then leading. And what were some of the things that you learned in that gap that you think made you better the second time around?
Um, well, I think in that gap, I had the great fortune of reporting to somebody who was a really good leader. And
Yeah.
and that individual helped me just become better at what I was doing as an individual contributor. But also he just gave me the confidence and also just the experience of leadership by seeing him in action. So I think that was the biggest change, and at that point, like it was in that role and at that company that eventually I was promoted once again. And it was different that second time around.
Um, what were some of the things? I'm a huge fan of role models, like in especially around leadership, like having a good example to look at and go, oh, this is cool. When you think back in retrospect, what were some of the things that that person did that you were like, oh, that's good leadership?
Yeah, and I'll compare it to when I was not a great leader. When you get promoted sometimes and you don't have any formal leadership experience or training, sometimes you're promoted because you were good as an individual contributor, but that doesn't translate all the time. And a lot of times, individual contributors are motivated by recognition and being in the limelight. And I think sometimes, new leaders or managers, that's where they struggles because the limelight is no longer meant to be for you. It's meant to be for the people on your team. And so this person I reported to, it was amazing how he took me under his wing and gave me challenging projects, but helped me a lot to get some of those early wins. So I definitely contributed a bunch, but he also made sure that the deliverable went really, really well. And when it did, he shined all the light on me, gave me all the recognition and all the reward. And it made me confident and it made my brand strong within that organization. And it was just something that I became very grateful for. And I said, wow, that's a really selfless, but an amazing thing to do. That's one example, right? And certainly there are a lot of other sort of micro examples along the way, but that's one that always sticks out in my mind.
Yeah, I love that example. Um, and I think that's one that gets missed by folks in leadership roles. I think when I started leading software teams, so this is interesting. This is the this is a weird benefit of having social anxiety. So when I started leading software teams, I had really, really bad social anxiety, and I didn't want the limelight. And so I never thought about, like, even though before that I'd been individual contributor, every time I got the limelight, I was really uncomfortable about it. And
Yeah.
when I took over as a team lead on my first team, like I didn't want it. So I was like, everybody, oh, this is what Michael built, or this is what the team did. Like I did that because that that was a very safe way with my anxiety to get everybody else, like, to have
Sure.
people look at the team and not look at
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
And, um, it's a weird benefit, I guess, of social anxiety that I hadn't thought about until you just now brought that up, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's an interesting side effect." Oh, it's funny. Um, Before we started recording, we were kinda talking about the mental game of leadership and, how the responsibility kinda never goes away. Um, Give me some thoughts on that subject.
Um, it's funny you bring that up too, because I've been thinking a lot about this lately, and I even have told my children, like around making sure the kind of work that they're doing that they're find a way to not always bring it home with them, right? As I have a son going to college and so forth. And I think that's something that I've done throughout my career is I sort of, when I say bring it home with me, I think we're always working, especially Monday through Friday, but it's in the back of your head at times, and there's always can be an escalation and so on and so forth. But what I think is very important, just as any sort of physical exercise or sport or athletic endeavor, you have to have rest and recovery in order to perform. And when you view it that way, you're actually doing your profession, your the company you're working for, your customers a service by taking rest and recovery because you're going to be better at what you are doing when you're actually doing it. It's definitely easier said than done. So it requires having some, habits that you consider rest and recovery. It could be actually, ironically, that sports and physical exercise and athletic endeavors are that recovery from a mental perspective. But it can be anything. It can be puzzles. It can be reading. It could be spending out time outdoors with your friends or your loved ones. So making sure you really, really prioritize that sort of engagement. You fit that in your life.
Yeah. I really like that. I'm a huge fan of using sports as my rest and recovery and context switching into something totally different. And, um, yeah, because and I notice actually, I my tendency is to do sports where they require a high degree of focus, like, mountain biking, like, you can't be distracted in mountain biking and, expect to not break any bones because you will get messed up, and,
Yeah,
I used to surf a lot, and surfing, you gotta be focused on what's going on in the ocean, Um, yeah, and I spent a bunch of time indoor rock climbing, and again, you gotta be focused, like, but it totally takes your mind away from work. Yeah, I really
exactly.
like that.
I like that you said that. I wasn't even thinking of it in that from that perspective, but it is completely true. It's like meditation. So, and I could say meditation is a great way, actually, and it is. But so is sort of this meditative quality of getting into a flow state with some other sort of physical activity or any other activity, really.
Yeah,
That's what I equate it to. You mentioned, like, surfing, like, you can see in the background that I've got a snowboard, but, when I'm snowboarding and I'm focused on the mountain and this or that, it's like I feel like in a flow state, I've been doing it for many years and achieve that flow state in a way that's not, hands on keyboard is good for you.
yeah, yeah. It's completely different, uh, you're in totally different context.
Yeah,
Like, and I think that's one of the resets for our brain is to have that completely different context. At least for me, having that big context switch has always been, uh, uh, it's always been super beneficial to my mental health, because I get rid of my stress, with in doing it. I'm burning off the cortisol from the day and everything. So I really like that. Um, with the folks on your teams, do you talk with them about, like, take care of your mental health? Like, how do you guys approach that?
yeah. I'm a big believer in being very communicative, being very deliberate. and direct about things like this, and really all kinds of things. Gain trust and make sure you're communicating things regularly. But the importance of recovery, I think, is super. You cannot be understated, right? And so, like, it's not as if I'm telling everybody every day, like, hey, take a break, take a break, take a break. But when you notice that people are grinding, you have to make sure that you're interjecting and saying, like, hey, like, as a kind thing, right? Like, hey, is everything all right? It's okay. Do you need a break? Do you need help? Um, you know, the challenging thing, I think, for leaders is that it really is the responsibility of the individual to prevent burnout. And so you kind of have to nudge and encourage, but sometimes people have a hard time actually stepping away and understanding how to prevent burnout, because
Mm.
it's a complex thing, and everybody is different. But I would say is being very open and deliberate about those conversations. And the other thing too is to make sure when you're taking breaks, when you're on vacation, that you aren't actually answering a ton of like emails and slacks. And now, like, it happens, I have to say. Unfortunately, it happens if there is, depending on where you're working, and if there's something critical, you might need to step in as a leader. But making sure they understand that that's an exception. Now, I've worked places where my leader is on vacation and they're showing up on calls, and that does, and I would feel it in my in my chest. I would feel like, am I going to be expected to join a call when I'm on vacation? So it is really important that you model healthy behavior when you're a leader.
I like that modeling healthy behavior. I think that's such a both in the context of with our teams, but also just as a parent. Like I want my kids to have better mental models and uh yeah, and yeah, being able to like get away. Like it's really hard to be snowboarding and on a call at the same time, you know.
Exactly. Although I've seen people do it, it's not my cup of
Oh my
tea.
god, really? Oh, that's terrible. Uh
Well, yeah, well,
Talk about not being in the moment. Um it's horrible. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of those, and props to you for doing this, is having those deliberate behaviors of talking to the team and like, "Hey, this is gonna make your life better." Uh, it's not all about work and the number of PRs or story points or whatever metric you're using. It's really the the taking care of you as a person, right? Like, I always want my people to be happy coming to work. Like, and I know that's a crazy idea, but I figure if they're happy coming to work, they perform better, and and everybody, we have better team conversations, and problem solving goes better, and paired programming works better. Like everything goes better when people are happy coming to work. And there's research from an economic perspective that companies where people are happy coming to work, they make more money. And
oh
I'm,
yeah, of course,
like I'm a
yeah,
capitalist, right? And
yeah.
so if happy people means we make more money,
I
yeah, I
know.
would.
It seems like such an obvious thing, yet there are still organizations out there that it's like command and control and lead by fear, and it makes me scratch my head every single time.
Yeah, I wonder if there's something in MBA programs where they teach people that. I've never gone to an MBA program, and I'm kind of afraid to. Um, I'm part of the reason. So the third startup that I joined, um, I was in a meeting one day with the VP of engineering and a couple other people, and somebody made a comment that um, that they were afraid that if we had more MBAs at the company, that was an indication we were going to fail faster, because there was this report that had just come out about MBAs killing companies and how it was an anti pattern, right? And I heard that, I'm like, my god, that's terrifying. I don't, like, I don't ever want to be in that situation. And I just wonder, like, what are they teaching people in MBA programs that has them
Yeah.
be anti-human? I don't, I'm like, I don't get it. Um, yeah, it's I, I, I guess are your teams, well, you're not in your office right now, right? Are you at home?
I'm in my home office, yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
We're distributed, so we're remote, all remote.
All remote. Okay, yeah, perfect. So, in that environment, I think that the communication and the happiness of the people is even like has to be even more deliberate
Yeah.
because so how long have you guys been doing all remote?
Yeah, I mean, so, where I'm at now, like, we're a small startup. I've been here for just over 3 months. Um, they've been all remote and ever since they've started. But my last job too, where I was 6 years, was very well known for being all remote, um, and it really kind of like what you said. I mean, it takes deliberate action in order to make that work, which means that you need to encourage people to do things like coffee chats. Like, don't just be meeting with people just to talk business. Sometimes you need to meet with a colleague just to talk and create personal connections. Trying to find ways when you're all remote to still meet in person at least once a year, or at least some of your team. Conferences or maybe on sites and so on and so forth. So and then being very conscious of the fact that people are in different time zones and they can be uh, feel not included in things, right? Like, and so making sure that you find ways to make sure you're spreading out sometimes team calls or company all hands and to fit multiple time zones, making sure that as a leader too, like, certainly I'm in the East Coast of the United States, so it's always hard for me when I have people reporting to me in Asia, but it's happened in my last two roles. And so I do need to make that sacrifice so that they're going to be staying up late or getting up early, as well, right? And so that we can have those connections and so on and so forth. So it's a lot of deliberate actions, I think, which make all remote successful.
Like that. That's yeah, yeah. I've had I've had remote teams since uh God, more than 20 years now. Yeah. Um and it was yeah, that was one of those how do you get people to feel included and and like you said, have conversations that are like the equivalent of a water cooler conversation,
Yeah.
random meeting in the hallway, right? Set that up and make that kind of stuff happen.
Yeah.
Um and the thing that I think the thing that historically has worked the best for me has been um rotating paired programming. Like we started doing pair programming uh and we had I can't remember how we did this, but it was always different. Like, the like people ultimately would get matched up, repeatedly over time, but um we were we were switching things around so people would be talking to different people on the team, doing paired programming things, working on stories, and that just worked really well because
Yeah.
people got to know each other really well. And the sad thing was, because I wasn't coding, I kind of felt left out of the conversations. um, and but what I did was I set up the one-on-ones, so I was talking to everybody every couple of weeks, but I also was randomly pulling people into planning meetings, um, to get their perspective on stuff as we were, like talking about how do we solve problems and feature requests and story points and all that stuff. I kind of had this rotating um, bench of people from the team, and I used that to talk with them, and that seemed to work out really, really well.
It makes sense.
Yeah,
I've seen things like that, not exactly what you're describing, but where I mentioned these coffee chats, but where you get randomly assigned and maybe you do one a week. so that at least you're, because people tend to get comfortable with the same set group of individuals, and then you're not giving each other opportunities to branch out and
Exactly. Yeah.
make
Yeah.
new connections. So I like what you did there with the rotating pair programming. I can see why that was effective.
Yeah. And then the other thing that we did uh, was we did cross pollination. I don't know what else to call it, where we would rotate people from in between teams.
Yeah.
Um, we wanted some cross training, and we wanted the just the idea flow. Somebody else to come in and go, oh, have you thought about solving a problem this way? And and the interesting thing was we actually, in the process of doing that, we had a guy that came in from the other team that was phenomenally good at thinking up ideas for solutions to problems. Just like so much so that the whole team was like, "Oh my god, this guy's like amazing." And we ended up stealing him. Um because 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 he and the funny thing was he was not the best coder on the team. Like, he was kind of like middle of the pack coder, but was just crazy creative with solutions. And the other team that he was working with was kind of, I'm trying to think of a polite way to say this. They were in maintenance mode for the stuff that they were doing most of the time, and it really wasn't using his skills because we were re-architecting a whole new set of tools for the company, and um, he was amazing for us. I was like super happy. I'm like, get him into his wheelhouse and into his zone of genius, and that was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you help people like stay intrinsically motivated?
Well, everybody is unique, right? I think this is the obvious answer. Every individual is unique, and so it takes time as a leader to get to understand that uniqueness, to know each individual as an individual. Now, of course, there's always like a shared vision and shared goals that you need to communicate. But when you can understand what somebody cares about, then you understand what motivates them. And I actually ask people directly, like, hey, what motivates you? Is it recognition? Is it being able to work on certain projects, right? And get them, try and make it more open ended. Now, I think actually it's an uncomfortable question for a lot of people, especially if you haven't gained that trust yet. But it's good to start having those conversations. And so the way that I can keep somebody intrinsically motivated is by giving them opportunity to work on things that motivate them, right? Like I know that sounds kind of simple, but it's not. And when but people, especially in the world of technology, there are certain kinds of things people like to work on, they like to learn. There's certain ways they like to approach problems, ways they like to collaborate, and when you find out what those are, and then you would match the opportunities to the individuals, it makes them happy. It's almost as if that's a little bit of the rest and recovery too, in some cases, from maybe the day-to-day grind.
Like that. So is this like, from a execution perspective, is this like part of your one-on-ones when you're asking people, what do you want to work on? Or how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say very early on in my relationship with them, I do ask, like, what are the kinds of things they like to do? And then it's some kind of regular check-in. It might be quarterly. It might be part of some formal, what I would consider stay interviews, just to see if an individual is getting the things they need to feel like they're able to give, themselves, in the sense of they feel they're contributing and that they're working on things that are meaningful. So like in those conversations at some regular cadence is usually effective. And and then there's always just like being aware of the current context for each individual. Like it's not hard to see that someone might be dealing with several escalations in the course of just a few weeks, and that they might be struggling a bit, and it's checking with them from a human perspective. and finding out like, or, hey, is everything okay? I recognize you're doing all of this work. Is this okay with you? And sometimes actually they love it, right? Like that might be what's motivating somebody. But other times it's like, yeah, I'm kind of like burning out. This is really tough. And then you help them and find a way, or you directly help them by giving them some relief, rotating them out of that situation, having somebody else pick up some of that workload, and getting that person, back to maybe some things that they enjoy a little bit more.
Nice. I like that. Yeah, it's I always think about what's the good behavior of leadership, like not just the philosophical perspective, but what do you do on a day-to-day basis? And I like the way you explain that. Yeah, yeah, because it's back to happy people are more productive. You
Oh,
know, and
is very, very, very true.
yeah, yeah. If I ever write a book on leadership, I think that's going to be the title. Happy people are
Happy
more productive.
happy people
Yeah,
are more productive. Yeah,
yeah. I
that's
just I just because it's such a it, it seems like that should be obvious.
I know, I know, I know. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, and I keep relationships with places that I've worked in the past, and like unfortunately, some people have end up in situations where they're not happy. And when I hear their situations, it's clear to me they don't want to be waking up and giving their all in order to hit some kind of goal or work towards a shared vision. So if they're not feeling appreciated, they're not happy. If they're being like overly micromanaged when they don't need to be, they don't have the autonomy to use their own thought leadership to solve problems when they're not heard, or they're just being treated unfairly. I can go on and on and on. All of those things happen to people. And for sure, they don't want to wake up and get right to work. They dread working.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's such a easy. It's an in my mind anyway. It's an easy problem to solve. Um, if leadership understands how, you know.
Yeah, and I think, I didn't wanna so if we dig into that just a tiny bit more, I would say that sometimes leaders, especially at the executive level, they're under immense pressure and stress themselves, and if they haven't really built that, appreciation for, um, I guess would say trusting that doing the right thing from a culture perspective will actually improve productivity, they fall back to almost a primitive behavior of like, I just need these things done. I'm under stress. These things need to happen. And then they push down maybe negative behavior, and unfortunately, I think that's what creates these situations. But yeah, and then it's up to maybe sometimes some frontline leaders or middle management to intercept that and shield the team from that type of scenario.
Yeah, yeah. I think I've always been a big fan of the first level team leads really having a strong level of self confidence and an understanding of the impact on the business for their roles. And I think to what you're talking about, if they really get that right, then it changes the power dynamic in the company
Yes,
because now they've got this super productive team and they aren't so reliant on the executives doing the right thing anymore
that's right.
because they've got this other layer that's like, hey, well, like it's my job to make sure that, as you said earlier, all my people get recognized, but also to figure out how to remove the friction for them so they can operate better, and
Yeah,
that's the biggie. Um, you're in a startup now, so maybe this is a question for the last role you were at.
sure.
How do you systematically train people to move into leadership positions?
I love that question. First, let me say like something that is always troublesome to me is when there is a leadership role that opens up, and then all of a sudden a bunch of people raise their hands, and you never knew that they would ever be interested in leadership, right? It's not until the role opens up that all of a sudden you know. So that's either means that I didn't do a good job of understanding what motivates this person, what kinds of things they like to do, or that individual is just being opportunistic. So it's like in these conversations about what motivates people, also understanding like what they want to do, where they want to go, without emphasizing too much like some future goals. Like let's focus on the here and now, but how can the here and now prepare you for what's to come? And when you find out that somebody does, for example, enjoy mentoring new employees or existing employees, when you find out that somebody that likes to help with strategy, and that's when you start exploring like, hey, they're exhibiting some of these leadership qualities. Hey, would you ever want to be in leadership? And a lot of times they'll say, yeah, I've thought about that. I just don't know really like what it takes. I don't have any experience. And then it's about giving them the opportunity to be a leader without the title, which comes in a lot of ways. And it's hard to do. So the people who do it, when that new opportunity comes up, for me, they're always first in line. Like I would not always, but I would almost always either hire from a pool of internal individuals that have been working as leaders without being a titled leader, than anybody else, right? That's very healthy for an organization, and it promotes the right behavior. So I think there's a lot of ways to be a leader without actually being a manager, I should say. And
Right.
it's giving those individuals those opportunities to do so. And by the way, as a leader, like an official leader, I guess I would say, like with a title, when you have individuals that are doing those leadership type things as individual contributors, it's making you yourself a much better leader. You're able to accomplish more. You're able to make the entire team better. You're building a culture of collaboration. And how great is it for an IC if they have multiple true leaders that are able to help them grow?
Yeah. Yeah. It's back to role models. They're
Yes.
like, oh, this is what's going on. This is what's possible. Yeah. I like that. It sounds like part of what you're talking about internally in terms of culture is having a culture of coaching. Um, and that's when I was in college, I worked on a high end restaurant that was one of their core success things was
Yeah.
internal coaching in every direction. Um, and I got to say that was such a profound learning experience for me.
Yeah.
Um, to to see that happen, because the coaching was almost always bottom up. It was almost never top down. Um, and and because the innovative thinking always came from the new people.
Yeah. That makes
Yeah, it was
sense.
interesting. Yeah, yeah, that's cool. I like that. Yeah, yeah. I always think about how to just as you're talking about how do you get people to how do you make sure they're ready for the role, especially in leadership because of the leverage effect. How are they ready before you give them a title, and how do you get them trained and in a way that's consistent, um, and then giving them an opportunity to experiment and
Yeah.
either love it or hate it, succeed or fail, whatever, um, to then move ahead. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And I like what you said. I mean, it gives them an opportunity to try out what leadership is like,
right,
because
right.
it's what I said earlier in my career, right? Where I liked the limelight back then, um, and being a leader, that's not really what it's about. And so it gives somebody the opportunity to say, like, hey, help this person be great. And if they enjoy doing that, then there's a good sign. But they might learn that they don't enjoy doing that, right? So
Yeah, yeah. I think the leadership is not about the limelight is such a like that needs to be said way more often. I think that's a I think um that's a really valuable perspective that I don't hear nearly often enough.
yeah,
And
if your reward is not seeing like the team you're building succeed, and seeing those individuals doing great things, and maybe even leaving your organization and getting better jobs in other companies. If that doesn't make you feel good, you shouldn't get into leadership.
Yeah. 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 I really, I don't hear that nearly often enough. So, thank you for saying that out loud and being super deliberate about it, because I, I think that's something that needs to be repeated over and over again so that it's becomes like part of the standard narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Um, what have I not thought to ask you about? Like, what's some fundamental thing about leadership that you're like, I wish Bill had asked about blah, 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 like something.
Um, Probably, I would say, not that I wish you would ask this, because it's probably the hardest part of the job, but it's when you're dealing with underperformance. How do you manage that? I would say the thing that I will never ever get used to or ever enjoy is when the day comes and you actually have to let somebody leave from your organization, even if it's the best thing for your organization and the best thing for that individual. And so taking like underperformance very seriously, meaning giving those people the opportunity to improve, and for them to reflect and figure out, like, is what they're doing what they want to be doing. So, like, too often people find out way too late that maybe they're not the right fit. They weren't giving the chances. I think that happens under poor leadership. Being very open and honest and direct and providing proper communication about what somebody can be doing better, getting their feedback for why something might not have gone well, because people make assumptions when you don't have that, is incredibly important. So I think that's the one area that leaders need to pay explicit attention to, if that makes sense, right? So I think it's a fair thing for all human beings, is to know where they stand. And I think there's cultural differences too. I've learned, like, leading global teams in the United States, we tend to be a bit, we struggle a bit with feedback, right? Where sometimes I would say Americans are more prone to wanting to do, sort of like that kind of sandwich you may have heard of,
Hmm.
and maybe sugarcoating things. And in other cultures, they appreciate it being very direct. You telling them, like, look, you're not doing this well, and this is what I need you to do differently, and this is how I can help. So I think it's navigating that.
I like that. Yeah. And yeah, yeah, it's always challenging when somebody's not performing at the level that we expected. And yeah, I think, for me, it's one of the questions has been, is there a better role for you in the
Yeah.
organization? You know, um, because I always, and this may be totally irrational. I'm completely willing to admit this, by the way. I worry about losing institutional knowledge, and I've seen enough problems where, um, somebody leaves the company and they're the subject matter expert on something, and then we have a problem 2 months later, and I'm like, oh my god, how do I get hold of them and get their insights or whatever? Um, so if at all possible, I really want to, unless people are just toxic. I don't know, like,
Yeah,
it,
that's another whole that's
yeah,
another stuff. Yeah.
yeah, but usually it's like, is there another role here in the company? And I've seen some amazing transformations in people when they've moved into a role that they're really happy about, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my god, that was, it's like the guy that was really good at being creative and solving problems was amazing. And I had another engineer years ago that, um, come by complete surprise, he moved into a sales role and became great at sales. And his sales director called me one day and was like, dude, why are you keeping this software like, why is he coding? Why was he coding? And I was like, because when he came in, that's what he wanted to do. Like, that was, so yeah, but yeah. And then there's people that this is the wrong company. Like,
Yeah. No, I like what you said. It's finding out if it's so as a leader, again, I think a good leader is helping somebody do the best that they can do, to be
right,
engaged, to feel like their work has meaning. So I like that you said sort of finding another role within the company or maybe somewhere else, because I think that's what a true leader will actually do. That's how you would approach it, right? It's finding out how to make this person engaged in their professional career. I mean, that's the rewarding human element of being a leader under the pressures, of course, of performing as a business, right?
right, right. Yeah, yeah. This has been cool. You've had great answers. I really appreciate it. This has been a great conversation. Yeah,
No, I appreciate the conversation as well.
yeah. I think this is the kind of thing that needs to. I mean, that's why we do this, is because I think this stuff doesn't get talked about enough. So, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.